hearing to discuss a request for a variance to allow a well and septic system in an ORD zoned district. And ORD means Office Research and Development, and a request for a special use permit for a storage facility in ORD located at PIN number 06-28-300-038 and 06-28-300-022. Roll call, please.
It's 6:30. Yeah.
I was just checking.
Planning and Zoning Board Commission, Jerry Daly,
Present.
George Duberstein,
Here.
Priest,
Here.
Hein. Here. Darrenowski.
Here.
George Duberstein. Here. And Schnellwith.
Here. All right, we have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Planning and Zoning Board Commissioners, Jerry Daly,
Aye.
George Duberstein,
Aye.
Priest,
Aye.
Hein. Darrenowski.
Aye.
George Duberstein. Schnellwith.
Aye.
Motion carried.
The petitioner in this case has requested a continuance of its public hearing until Tuesday, February 27th, 2018. After a motion and second, I'll give more of an explanation. Need a motion, please?
Second.
All right, the individuals that purchased the property and initially submitted a plan to build a self-storage facility at that site had all along planned on doing it as an investment, maybe building it and having some chain and buy it out. From when they first came and talked to us to now, they have potentially found another purchaser. And they're working on the contract, but the contract is not yet, the sale contract is not yet complete. They asked for the continuance for these two reasons. One, if the sale does not go through, they have still done all the paperwork in order to have a special use permit. And that we could reconvene, and we've checked this with Attorney Rock, we can reconvene this meeting next month. Two, if they do sell, there's no reason for them to have a special use permit meeting. The individuals who buy would have to go through all the paperwork that is required. So that's the reasoning behind the request for continuance. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Planning and Zoning Board Commissioners, Jerry Daly,
Aye.
George Duberstein,
Aye.
Priest,
Aye.
Hein. Darrenowski.
Aye.
George Duberstein. And Schnellwith.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is adjourned at 6:34. Let Kathy catch up before we start the next meeting. I'd like to call a regular board meeting for the Village of Haynesville to order. January 23rd, 2018 at 6:35. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Jerry Daly,
Here.
Trustees George Duberstein,
Here.
Priest,
Here.
Hein. Darrenowski.
Here.
George Duberstein. And Schnellwith.
Here. We have a quorum. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Trustees George Duberstein,
Aye.
Priest,
Aye.
Hein. Darrenowski.
Aye.
George Duberstein. And Schnellwith.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. We have a guest tonight, Mr. Mike Adam, and George or Georgianne, did you want to give an introduction, please?
Mike is a senior biologist with the Lakes Management Division of the Lake County Health Department, and he's here to talk about Cranberry Lake.
Great, thank you very much, Georgianne. Good evening.
You could either move it to the side, or you can pull it out and carry it with you if you so desire, whatever works for
I
you.
may have to do that since I may have to move the slide. So thank you very much for inviting me today. I was talking to Ted over here before the meeting. I was actually here before this board in 2001 talking about Cranberry Lake after we had first been out there. So 17 years later, I've got a few more gray hairs, but the lake actually is doing exceptionally well, and one of the things I'm going to talk to is give you an update on that. We actually, the health department, for those of you who don't know, we do a lot of water quality monitoring throughout the county, all the swimming beaches, so we have almost 1/4 of all the swimming beaches in the entire state are located here. We're blessed, obviously, with many water features like Michigan, as well as the 260 inland lakes, thousands of acres of wetlands, miles of rivers and streams. And so one of the things for the health department, from the environmental health standpoint, is we want to make sure that people are able to enjoy these safely, not getting sick from different things like E. coli or harmful algal blooms, but also just generally looking at the overall water quality excuse me, of the various water bodies. So Cranberry Lake, I will just say right off the bat, is closer. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, up
I
over.
thought maybe I was going too loud. Is probably one of the finest lakes that we have in the entire county. It is exceptional in a number of different ways that I'll share with you right now. Okay, just to kind of give you some perspective here, I'm sure probably many of you are aware, Cranberry Lake located here, it drains, it's at the top of its watershed, so there's not a lot that drains into it, but it'll eventually drain to the east into this wetland complex, and then go into Highland Lake, which Highland Lake goes into Round Lake, which Round Lake goes into Long Lake, and then eventually into the chain of lakes. So the fortunate thing about Cranberry is that it does not receive a lot of storm water or polluted water from other areas in the area. So this is actually the watershed of Cranberry Lake, so we're down here, and all this within the red is where the water drains into Cranberry Lake. So you do have this complex, wetland complex around the lake that's protecting it, mostly made of cattails. But you do have some areas that are draining here that are residential areas, and this is where a lot of the pollutants would come from. Things like fertilizers from nutrients from lawn fertilizers. This time of year, road salt is a big issue, and we've seen this in Lake County. Many of our lakes are becoming more saline as all this road salt then gets into our water bodies. So that is something that does have to be taken into consideration into the future. Many of our lakes are seeing increases in pollution, increases in pollutants like chloride. I'll have a handout at the end that will be distributed, but I don't know if many of you have seen this. This is the bathymetric or depth contour map of the lake that we created a number of years ago. This lake it has a very shallow shelf around the edge here, and then it kind of comes down into a point here. Some of our lakes, this is a natural glacial lake. Some of our lakes are more bowl-shaped, so you look at Highland Lake, Brown Lake, they're more like a bowl, whereas this lake is more like a martini glass, where it's really shallow and it dips down into a deep hole. That also offers some challenges to the management of the lake as well because of that situation. But this is something that the lake is approximately 20 feet deep, but the average depth is only just over 5 feet deep. Just some historical perspective here. You can access these aerial photos online, but the lake hasn't changed a whole lot. This is a 1939 photo to 74. By 74, it's pretty much taken the shape that it is now. You still have these ball diamonds here, and it goes through the years. If I showed you an aerial from last year, it would pretty much be looking the same. I know in the past we've had some concerns, or there were some concerns about the cattails encroaching and filling in the lake. I really don't see that as being an issue as long as the water levels remain the same. The Cattails don't like to get their feet too wet. They don't mind a little bit of wetness, but anything greater than 2 feet, they usually don't grow very well in. So it hasn't changed a whole lot, which is pretty amazing given the urban environment that we live in. So it is what we call a glacial pothole lake. So when the glaciers receded thousands of years ago, it left these chunks of ice. But this one's a little different. This is more like a wetland type of pothole lake because it has this very organic peaty bottom. What I mean by that is kind of like a boggy bottom that is very made of years and years of decayed plant matter, and which is different than, let's say, Round Lake or Highland Lake or Grace Lake, which is going to have more of a harder bottom. Some sediment on top of that, but a harder bottom. That does have implications on what happens in the lake, and I'll be mentioning that in a little bit, but it's important to point out that peaty organic bottom. We first came out into the lake in 2000 and looked at the lake, and then we also put it on our Sentinel Lake program for 10 years, where we actually came out to the lake every year for 10 years. It was one of 7 lakes in the county that we gave that distinction to, partly because of the uniqueness of Cranberry Lake. We wanted to see if it was going to be changing. Also, the townhomes that went into the north of it, we were a little concerned how that might influence the lake itself. And then this third bullet point here, we do consider this one of the top quality lakes in the county. And in fact, we're pretty familiar with many of the lakes in northeast Illinois. This probably is up there at the near the very top. So the village should be very proud to have this within your village limits, and even promoting it what a unique resource you really have here. And I know you are proud of it. So a couple of the reasons why it's important is water quality reasons. It has very low nutrient levels in it. A key nutrient that we look at with lakes is phosphorus. And the lower the number you have in phosphorus, the less phosphorus you have, the less problems you're going to have with the lake itself. So you want to be sort of at the higher end of this. So of 175 lakes, Cranberry ranks 29th, which is pretty good, and I'm going to explain why that is. During this Lake Sentinel summary, we saw no significant changes to the water quality. We cannot say that about the other lakes that we did this for, nor other lakes that we've been looking at over the course of time. Most of them are seeing some declines in some parameter or another, either increased chloride levels, higher phosphorus levels, more other sedimentation. We didn't see that in Cranberry Lake, which again is a testament to a number of different things. One is that it does have a small watershed. That vegetative buffer around the lake of cattails really helps filter out a lot of the nutrients before they even get there. Excellent aquatic plants, and I'll mention this in a little bit here. Aquatic plants are really, really important for lakes. Essential to have a high quality lake, you have to have good plants in the lake and the right kind of plants as well. And then the no management of the lake, to our knowledge, it's not actively managed. I know there was some work done along the shoreline with the invasive species and a little bit with the cattails, but in the lake itself, I'm not aware of any active management. And I think that's a really key point to kind of take forward here. Since we are seeing no changes, part of that is related to that. We haven't really done a lot with it. The aquatic plants is where this kind of really shines. And this isn't something where people are going to get too excited about. Most people may not be that interested, but of 171 lakes, it ranks 3rd in the aquatic plant diversity in Lake County. And what makes it really unique is it has 4 species of these things called bladderworts that I'll mention in a little bit here. I'll show a picture of it. They're actually carnivorous, so very similar to like pitcher plants and Venus flytraps and things like that, except these are in the water, not on land. One of those species is an endangered species in Illinois, called small bladderwort. And then it has the largest population of what we call water shield, which is a type of lily that we have. And I'll show you a picture of that. These are the 2 other ones that you have, Illinois pondweed and Sago pondweed. Again, in northeast Illinois are bigger populations. So these bladderworts are really kind of interesting. They actually produce this yellow flower in the springtime. These plants here, these leaves are actually a water shield. This plant actually grows in between them in different places, but if you do a close-up look at this, these bladders actually are open, And when the little, there's tiny little zooplankton and things that swim in the water, when they get close to these bladders, they actually suck them in and they eat them. So just like a Venus flytrap does. And there's 4 different species of that. Nowhere else do I know of in Northeast Illinois that has that kind of competition. Water lilies, there are 3 different kinds. White water lily, obviously the white flower. Spatterdock, which is also called yellow water lily, has a yellow flower. These 2 have like little cuts in their leaves. And then you have this pretty unique one here called water shield. It has a purple flower. It has a very large population in their lake, and I'm not aware of any other lake in Illinois, or at least in northeast Illinois, that has this big population, or even in Lake County, this is the only lake that has them. Gray's Lake used to have some. They eradicated them with herbicide treatments. There had been one other lake, I think it was East Loon Lake, that had them eradicated with herbicide treatments. So this is another one that really makes this lake shine. So not all of it's good news. So there are some challenges with the lake. So one of them is it does have a history of fish kills, and that's primarily due to low oxygen level issues. The fish populations, especially game fish, need dissolved oxygen concentrations at least above 5 milligrams per liter. They could probably survive on 3, but 5 for them to be healthy. We have found in the summer months, greater than 75% of the volume of the lake is less than 5. So that's doesn't bode well for good fishing. Other lakes that we are similar to this, Deer Lake and Antioch, Schreiber Lake and Lakewood Forest, they're very, very similar, have usually fairly poor fishing or poor fisheries in them because of that. And the reason for that is that peaty bottom I talked about in the very beginning is it consumes a lot of oxygen. It's a decomposing plant matter, and it's just sucking the oxygen out of the water. And that can happen in summer months, and also can happen in the winter months. Like right now, we get snow cover on top of the ice. There's no light penetration through the ice. There's no photosynthesis going on, so all the oxygen can go away, and you get dead fish. So, and then the other thing I talk about aeration. One solution to low oxygen levels are aeration systems, but because this peaty bottom is very flocculent, it's very soft, it would not be recommended. We've been out there, if you drop an anchor from a canoe and let it just drop to the bottom, once it hits the bottom, you get this huge plume of just floating little pieces of plants and everything. So that's what would happen if you put an aerator in there, it would just be this cloudy mess. And then 2 other offer these 2 things based on our experience dealing with all the lakes in Lake County. The 2 primary threats that we see for a lot of lakes are overmanagement and introduction of aquatic invasive species. So overmanagement, this is probably number 1. They always start with good intentions, but many times lead to unintended consequences. And examples I give are these lakes here, and there's other ones too, where overuse of aquatic herbicides causes issues that sometimes are irreversible. And what I say here is flip the lake is, a lake is oftentimes either plant-dominated or algae-dominated. So if you treat the lake, over-treat the lake, and usually this starts out very, very small. Somebody will say, well, can I just treat this little area here because it's bothering me, I can't get my boat through. And then that does well, and then they say, oh, next year I want to do this, and I want to do this, and pretty soon the whole lake gets bombed, basically, by aquatic herbicides, and it can flip from a plant-dominated lake to an algae-dominated lake. And so when you have these algae-dominated lakes, there's no plants in the water, the oxygen levels crash. This bottom picture, you've probably seen this kind of like cotton candy-looking green algae on top of in ponds. This type of algae here, down here, is called blue-green algae. This kind of algae can actually produce a toxin that can make people and animals sick. If you ever heard of a dog dying or a cattle dying, they usually drink water from a pond that has blue-green algae. We don't want that situation. We do have lakes that have happened where they used to be like this, now they're like this. And you see I have here some different arrows, different thicknesses, so it's easy, fairly easy to move a lake from this situation to this situation, but it is extremely difficult to go back to this. Once you are here, you're pretty much staying there. And we unfortunately have seen many lakes in the county do that. They flipped over to algae dominated, and they're wishing that they had something of this back. The other caveat with is invasive species. These are oftentimes introduced by boats or bait buckets. Zebra mussel is the most common, and Eurasian water milfoil, which is a plant that are most common. And I'm not aware, I was thinking about this before I came over here, I'm not aware of, first of all, none of these are in Cranberry Lake. And there's very, very few lakes, even in Lake County, that don't have at least one of these in there. Most frequently, it's Eurasian water milfoil. And amazingly, you don't have it in this lake. It's usually brought in by boats that come in and drop off. So there are lakes, you can ask Highland Lake and Round Lake, and some of the ones locally, they'll spend thousands of dollars every year trying to combat this invasive species. So it's just something to kind of be aware of that you don't have it yet. Zebra mussels are almost usually exclusively brought in by boats, motorboats, because the actually small larvae of the zebra mussel get sucked up into the engine coolant of your motor, and then when you go from one lake to another lake, and then you start up your motor again, that cooling water that was in the engine now goes into the new lake, and you've just infested that lake. And then once these are in there, there's nothing that eats it, and there's no predation. They kind of go a little crazy. So, and we see detrimental impacts on both the water quality and also the fishery, because the zebra mussels are filter feeders, and they filter out the kind of the food chain, the little microscopic plants and animals that the young fish require. And so you see repercussions up and down the fish food chain. So those are things we really, and the best defense really is prevention from them getting there in the first place. So our recommendations are pretty simple, and actually they're like the same we had back when 17 years ago. It's basically, maintain the lake for aesthetics, natural resources, water quality with minimal to no management of the lake. That's our recommendation. And then the invasive species around the shoreline, they're perfectly well and probably a good idea to maintain and manage the buckthorn and the phragmites. I would probably just stay away from the cattails. I know there was discussion at one time to try to treat the cattails. Those kind of it's kind of messy to try to get rid of those, but these ones could be managed as well. But again, just in conclusion, this is quite a resource that we have here and consider for us one of our favorite lakes that we have, and it's very unique, and we kind of hold it out as one of our prides in the county itself. So we'd be happy to help you in any way possible, any other technical advice you have, any information about other things you have, other ideas you have on the lake, questions about anything else.
Can we lights back on, please? Thank you for your presentation, sir. Any questions from the board? If not, I have some. All right, we have this wonderful pure lake that you can't see from hardly anywhere unless you walk on the path. Nobody, as far as we've dealt with so far, nobody uses it. It's a gem, but what does it do for the village?
Well, I think you could promote it when you are promoting the village itself, just the unique natural resources that you have here. You have the walking path around, there could be interpretive signage, there already is, but explaining to people what our unique resource is, and how it impacts that particular area, but also potentially downstream.
What does, I understand it's pure and what would I say, biologically unique, but as a resident, the only thing I can do is walk around it and maybe look at it through the cattails. Although, and I read your team report some time ago, or at least one that you were part of in 2008, and I looked at the document, the deed from the Army Corps of Engineers. We are not restricted by deed. By practice, yes, but by deed, we're not restricted canoeing. There's no restriction on swimming. There's no restriction on fishing. Are you recommending that we not allow any of those?
would recommend that you kind of maintain it as it is. So, I mean, we're not here to tell you that you certainly can't do any of those things. You certainly can, but in order to maintain it as it is, I would make that recommendation partly based on what we have experienced in other lakes. We've seen where someone may say, well, can we just let this activity happen? And then it goes to, the next activity and the next activity. So even let's say you said, well, we're going to let kayaks on the lake. So someone may go out on the lake and then, they probably will get a call saying, well, I got stuck in the weeds. Can you guys do something about it? Can you treat the lake? Or you may have someone go, well, you're letting kayaks on the lake, but I have a bad shoulder and I have a boat with a little trolling motor. Okay, but then he gets stuck in the weeds. So now they're going to say, treat the weeds, there's so many weeds out there. So now you get into it, and you can contact someone, I can give you some names of some of these other municipalities that it's just this, constant, we want this, and you end up treating more and more in the lake. So, I mean, if it was just, again, you can do whatever you kind of want to do, but just from experience, we've just seen where a little bit
Water quality goes down. And, well, of course, the one ladder board is protected because it's endangered, so we certainly couldn't do anything to harm that. At least that's my understanding. Would you agree?
Actually, with endangered, Illinois, it's an Illinois and threatened endangered species. So as long as you own the bottom of the lake, you can do what you want with that. It's different for fish species or bird species. That's a different story, but for aquatic plants, there is not.
No protection. Okay.
I've got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First of all, it should be known that in order, let's assume for the sake of argument, that we were to allow certain activity on the lake. The question is, how do people get there? They have to get there going through the wetlands and the woodlands. And our charter from the Corps of Engineers specifically prohibits any activity in that area going to the lake. So
Without their permission.
that's true. That's true. You'd have to, and there's a whole list of things that you're prohibited from doing without getting a written permission from the Corps of Engineers. You need to keep that in mind. Question for you. Number one, can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yes.
All right. Secondly, part of our charter is to maintain the area surrounding Cranberry Lake. And some of that includes getting rid of the invasive species. We've been doing that, and they have burns as well as herbiciding events to do that. My question is, do we have a risk or in danger if we herbicide in the wetlands, for example, and it has stuff leaching into the lake and then changing the water quality?
It is very possible. It depends on what type of herbicide is being used. If you are, there are certain label restrictions on the different herbicides. So, like, you could not take your Roundup that you use on your weeds on your yard. You cannot use it in your aquatic systems. So, as long as it is an approved herbicide that it can be used now, the concern would be if that herbicide, if you're targeting a specific species of invasive species along the shoreline, would it leach into and impact, let's say, those bladderworts? That is very possible. So the bladderworts could be, let's say, 2,4-D is a common herbicide that's used sometimes to treat broadleaf plants. Bladderwort is considered a broadleaf plant, so if that leached into the lake, yes, it could impact those plants or the lilies. Those are all kind of, and those bladderwort plants tend to hang out along the edges where the cattails are. So, if you did some of it, I would just recommend having some sort of a buffer between the water and where you're doing some of the work.
Can I just answer some of that? We don't do We don't do any herbiciding of the cattails, and we have done, over the years, the broad herbiciding, and now what we do is on the backpack, almost individual plants, so it's not like it's going to be out in the air, and you do an acre at a time, just for your information.
I have two more things. Can you go back to the slide that showed the watershed, please? Okay. One thing I learned this year during our flood and my education in the wetlands is from Tall Oak, our water flow off the streets into our storm sewers doesn't flow towards Cranberry Lake. Natural watershed, I'm not going to argue that point, but our stormwater flows south along our retention wall that fell earlier this year, comes out, goes into a detention pond that you see, I think it's one to the, let's see, that one. And then flows back into the south part of Haynesville Meadow, and then goes that way. So not all water that strikes here.
So this area here, turning south.
The road immediately south of the lake, the east-west road, all that water drains, stormwater drains south.
It's even better.
The second thing, and I want to make this very clear to the public and George Shooter and the rest of the trustees, I have no plan, no real subversive idea of changing the lake into something else. What I'm trying to establish is the value of the lake, what we are restricted, what our restrictions are, and what they are not. And that can give the board, the public, something else to think about.
I have one other question. It was obvious from your comments about boating that conceivably there could be some contaminants in the boat or in the water in the boat. And if it goes into the lake, conceivably you can add it. What about ice fishing? You don't have the same kind of issue, although I assume, let's assume that they use some kind of bait. I don't know what they're doing. I'm not an ice fisherman. Is that a problem?
Well, bait, yeah, any bait, especially if it's live bait, if it ends up escaping or getting into the water, sure, it can introduce invasive species. Sometimes carp, minnows, people can't tell the difference between carp minnows and fathead minnows. So, but they'd also have to pour, especially in ice fishing, they'd have to pour it down the hole. So, I mean, it's more of an issue during the summer season. So, I mean, it could happen. Bait buckets as well. Again, if you're going for like zebra mussels and things like that, if you're going from one lake, you're fishing in Highland Lake, and you refresh the water in your bait bucket, and then came over to Cranberry, and then you dump that water, it's conceivably you could introduce one of those other species.
Mr. Creasy, you have a point?
Yeah, well, maggots and spikes are pretty much the fishermen's. I fished that lake, okay, I've been, okay, there's a path. Actually, if you look at it right on the northeast corner there, you see that path going right by the townhouse there, right there. There was a path at one time, originally there was a path there, which has been used by other ice fishermen and everything else. They've had canoes, have been in there and everything else, okay? I don't believe that a person walking in there once or twice is going to sit there and endanger the whole lake, okay? I don't believe that ice fishing and using the maggots and everything else would contaminate the whole lake, because most of the time it's going to be pretty much dead after it freezes and everything else in the winter time, I should say. I always believe that access should be to every lake. I believe we should have access to Highland Lake. I don't believe that a God-made land or lake should be owned by anybody. It should have access to it. I go to Minnesota. There is access to every lake. No matter what, you don't own anything. The DNR says, it says this is what you can do to on this lake. And here it's the exact opposite. Everybody's going to shut it off and close it down and everything else. Well, when you're taking away from the kids that might want to go, and they're in their neighborhood, and they say, hey, listen, I might want to fish or whatever. If you have a little opening for them to go, to sit there and go and try their luck at catching some bluegill and crappie, then be great.
Okay. Well, we are not prohibited from doing it.
No, I'm just saying that, but it's, like I said, there's, we didn't mean to grill you, sir.
No, I perfectly understand the scenario, and, you know, I'm not saying don't do that, but if you want to keep it, you know,
Pristine.
yeah, then that would be the recommendation. So, and again, just following some of our experiences, even with, you know, stocking fish, you know, that we've seen some positive things that have happened, but we've also seen some detrimental things.
We will ban skinny dipping.
Okay,
Can I just ask a question? Can waterfowl bring contaminants in
yes.
probably even easier than any of the kids fishing or ice fishing?
They can, but it's more common to have human interaction. So if it would have been waterfowl, let's say, you would probably have some of these species, or these invasive species. You don't. Whereas I can look at every lake in the county that has public access or boating, and they have invasive species. Okay, that doesn't mean the lake is dead. You know, that doesn't, you know, it's going to die. It's just, it poses a lot of challenges. And if you're the sole owner of this lake, so anything that happens or people want is going to fall to you. One of the issues that we have in other lakes is, kind of getting to your point, is there could be, on a given lake, you know, 50 to 100 bottom owners that own the lake. And in order for anybody to do anything, you have to get every bottom owner's permission, which is virtually sometimes impossible. So then what ends up happening is sometimes nothing happens. And then the quality of the lake just,
What's the source of the lake?
the source.
Yeah. I mean, is there fresh water, or is there water?
Springfin.
It's most likely there are some fries and spring fed in there. It's difficult for us when we're doing our work to actually determine that. The geology in Lake County does, when you have some areas where we do get these kind of upwellings or springs, and you have shallow groundwater lenses, they call them. So, so you can, if anybody has a well, there are some wells that are only like
Our whole village is on a well.
15 feet deep, some are, 200 feet deep, depending on what you want. Deeper the better, probably for quality goes, but
So,
yes,
so in essence, clean water is coming into the lake at some rate at all time. And then we lose some through evaporation.
and you're losing some to the outlet.
I'm sorry, some.
The outlets will drain across, east. So, but a lot of it, then comes through, or if it does come through here, it's getting kind of filtered through that wetland of cattails. That helps a lot.
All right.
I have a couple of questions. The cattails, will they, looking back at the 4 pictures, it looks like they've just stayed there. They don't continue to grow.
They can if you give them the opportunity to. So I mentioned I don't expect them to expand more just because they kind of reach the depth where they can grow. But if, let's say, the waters start flowing, we get a huge drought for a couple of years, the water levels drop, they're going to move. They will move. But then if the water levels go up again, or if somehow we get higher level, they'll drown out too. So that's why, manipulating the outlet is another issue, which would definitely require Army Corps permission to do that. But, to maintain this level pretty well.
On
Now-
Lake County maps, which is where I think you want some, there's the timeline.
Yep.
And if you can follow the timeline from I think the early 1900s up to current day, and at one point there's a couple-year drought. So you can see the water really slimmed down, and I'm assuming cattails spread some, but then the drought went away and cattails went back with it.
Now, on your website, do you have all the other lakes that are comparative to this?
Yes, on our website we have lake reports that the mayor had kind of pointed out on most all those lakes, 170 or so.
175?
Yeah, or something, around there. If you want to look at them, some are long reports, so if you want a quick, synopsis, or if you have some specific question you have, like, I'd like to compare us to a similar lake, I can share a report like that with you. I'll leave my business cards here as well, so if you have any other questions.
But is it just something that a regular person can just just go onto your website? and
Yes.
look up?
What are your regulars?
Uh,
I found this online. I can't tell you how I got there, but I found it and it was there.
Yeah,
Well,
if you
I
were-
was part of a team.
If you just did Lake County Health Department Lakes group, and you'd find it there. There's also bathymetric maps of all many of the lakes that are there, so if you wanted to see what it looked like in Island Lake or so forth. What would be interesting, I think, with this lake would be to have a fisheries assessment done. I'm not aware of one that's ever been done before, just to see what kind of fish there are in there, you know, and
They haven't done that.
no, I mean, it's part of it's because it's so difficult to access, you know. The other thing would be, you could there's consultants that can do this, take a backpack, like shocker, go around and just kind of shock the fish. They don't die, but they just get stung briefly, and then just to get an idea, because it would be interesting to see, and maybe over the years, people have thrown fish in there too, I don't know.
Might not be able to afford that, but a couple kids from Cherry Mountain, same thing. All right,
Let's, it wouldn't harm,
unless we have any other pertinent questions,
Just one,
we'll move on.
just one question. If we wanted to have a fish study done, how would we go about it?
Let me tell you, Eric, but I talked with the fishery person that would be responsible for Cranberry Lake, and he said he wouldn't be able to get in there because his boat is way too big to deal with Cranberry
the
Lake.
whole thing, the only thing that Cranberry Lake can actually hold right now is canoe or kayak. It's something, a boat can have no, any kind of, I mean, no matter what, aluminum boat or whatever, it's just, first of all, the cattails would be restricted from, going in, you have to wash it in yourself. So the only time really you'd have accessibility to it is by going over the ice, I should say.
All right,
So,
going,
I'd just like to make one comment that it's not like we live in an area where Cranberry Lake is the only lake available for fishing. I mean, you could walk to Highland Lake, Grace Lake.
you can't use,
Well, Grace Lake is not far, a 5-minute drive. So what my point is there's a lot of other places you can have access to without doing anything to Highland.
thank you, sir, appreciate your time.
Thanks,
The-
Mike.
The handout that I passed down is a copy, it's not the total deed, but it does contain the restrictions from the Army Corps of Engineers that you can look at on your own time. All right, moving on.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Evans, once you wrap up, don't feel obligated like you have to stay. Although it's an exciting meeting. You're welcome to join us. Public comments. Anyone signed up? Yeah. All right. Consent agenda, motion please. So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Trustees George Duberstein,
Aye.
Priest,
Aye.
Hein,
Aye.
Darrenowski,
Aye.
Georgianne Duberstein,
Aye.
and Chanelith. Motion carried.
Reports. My main report is in your packet. There's a couple items I'd like to share and highlight. Mr. Rock sent me an email today at my request. I'll just read it to you. It's an update on Dunkin' Donuts. The contract for the land sale of Dunkin' Donuts required a purchaser to apply for financing within 45 days of the execution of the real estate contract. The purchaser has applied for financing, but his attorney told me today, this was yesterday, that financing is not yet finalized. Consequently, the status of that sale is that we are awaiting final approval of financing. Once the purchaser has financing approval, we will schedule a closing date. So that's the update. I don't think this is anything to worry about. It's just the way it's going. In the mayor's report number 4, I continue with contracts. CENTCOM, I attended CENTCOM today, and they voted unanimously to let us out of our contract with them, not holding us to the 365 mandatory day notice. Since we've been not using their services for 10 years and only paying a reduced rate, this withdrawal from CENTCOM will save us $1,300 the remainder of this fiscal year and about $5,100 annually beyond that. Mr. Crease, you've saw him stepping your toes, are you going to talk about the garage doors?
But can we just deal with the dispatch for a second? It was my understanding that years ago, even though we were using CENTCOM, we were one of the owners of it. So,
We use that word.
so what you're saying is that we would no longer be owners?
We'll have no vested interest. I think the landscape, and I use that term on purpose, landscape has changed. When the previous mayor of Minnesota decided to hold on to our basic claim to CENTCOM, it was in the early stages of the state looking at 911 consolidation. And she thought that if we were in that and CENTCOM became one of these centers, we would get a lower rate. Well, you're voting later tonight on the extension of our contract with Grays Lake Police, which also extends our contract with Glenview Dispatching. Glenview Dispatching has, including us, 18 towns that they serve. CENTCOM, I don't have the exact number, it might be a little bit less than that. I think it's 13 when I heard at the meeting today. Both of them are vying for the consolidation. But my thought that led me to this is that we're paying Glenview X amount of dollars a year for their services, and we're lengthening that contract. Why keep giving away $5,100 a year?
Okay, just wanted to understand what that money was going to going for.
All right, get back to the agenda. Clerk, Madam Clerk.
Okay, in review of our ordinance on temporary signs, a question has been come up for clarification. And I passed this out to everybody, and it is highlighted, and it does state under time limitations for temporary signs. So this is in reference to political signs, and it says not to, other than for sale and for rent or political signs, not to be erected or maintained more than 30 days prior to the special event to which the signs are applicable, and shall be removed within 5 days following the election or special event. So what this is telling me is that you can put up your signs,
Election signs.
election signs, anytime. And we've been using the practice of 30 days before the election.
I believe that in the past, it was decided that there aren't supposed to be any restrictions on political signs. It's a freedom of speech issue.
Well,
I mean,
I
because
don't
we
think any of us
did,
are ready to answer that, but the purpose tonight is to discuss the board's wishes, and then we can, if we want to suggest some changes, we'll obviously have Jim take a look at it.
because I think that's what, we used to have a time limit. You couldn't put them up until so many days before the election and so on. But then it was brought to our attention, I think it was by one of the Ensign attorneys, that it's a freedom of speech issue and political signs you can't have restrictions on it.
But
I don't remember that at all.
in our practice, the packet that we've been handing out for the last number of elections has included a copy of this ordinance that says 30 days.
Right.
And that's been our interpretation. We're discovering, as Kathy did on this one, different things in our ordinances that lead to questions.
Wait, but read this. It says,
I know
the
how.
limitations for other than political signs.
Georgianne, that's what Kathy said. That's why we're bringing it to the board now, to try to ascertain which way the board members would like it to be. The way it reads now is not the way we've applied it, because it was misread before. Right now, the way it reads, it can be anything.
Like somebody running for a political position could put a sign up today.
If somebody was running for 2020 president, they could put, according to the way this reads, they could put a sign up today.
Check with Jim. I think he's going to say that it has to be this way.
Do we have any feelings of direction or preferences from the board? Would you like it, if legal, to be restricted to a number of days?
I think we should find out from Jim before we make any.
He's not asking if.
I'm asking,
But what's the point of getting consensus if you don't even know whether it's legal or not?
because
Because we're all here now, and he's gonna have to talk to the man.
and if it is legal, then I know where you stand.
Okay.
I mean, Jim is a phone call away for me almost every day, so that would be a big deal. Just want to know how you feel.
Well, it really hasn't been a problem per se.
But that's because we've been telling people 30 days. I think it should be 30 days.
I'm sorry, you said you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it should be 30 days. I think it should be restricted. Because I don't want somebody's sign sitting out, area to make a turn, and I don't want it there for 6 months if there's no restriction. I think 30 days is plenty of time.
If we're able to, I think we should change it to make it so that if it's a legal issue and it is a freedom of speech issue, then obviously we can't. But if we are able to, I think I agree, it should be 30 days.
Are you saying that just for political signs, and not the other two would be?
Well, for sale or for rent,
You have to.
we have to let that, but I'm saying for political
I
signs.
want to clarify what you're saying, so.
So far, 2 of you have spoken up and said for political signs, you would prefer a 30-day restriction. That's 3. If you don't, that's
No.
fine.
No.
Okay.
I would agree.
Agree to no or 30 to 30? 30, okay. John, you said
I said 30.
30.
So who are we missing?
George.
Oh, George.
And you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I'll tell you what to say.
What she said.
I don't know that we need to
No, that's basically.
Okay, so we have a no, and I don't know,
Oh, yeah.
and some 30s. All right, I'll talk to Jim. I'll give you a reminder. And we'll figure it out, we'll let you know. Drop you an email like I used to do. Anything else, Madam Clerk?
No, that's it. Thank
All right, thank you. Finance and treasurer.
I'm just still reeling from the fact that we're still working on the budget. We've gone through the first round. I made it out of Kelly's office in under 2 hours, so that was good. We